Thank you very much. I'd like to point out co-authors on this talk, my colleague Jim Hoyle, who also works at the Lake Ontario unit, as well as Sue Doka, Christine Boston, and John Midwood, who all work with Fisheries and Oceans Canada at CCIW in Burlington. So very briefly, some background on Hamilton Harbour. It was identified as an area of concern, or an AOC, due to a well-known history of heavy industrial use, urbanization, and the impacts associated with those uses. A couple of groups, many groups, but a few notable ones, including the Bay Area Restoration Council, or BARC, and the Bay Area Implementation Team, known as BAIT, are working on the goals set out in the Remedial Action Plan. This includes, for our interest, monitoring and restoration of degraded fish populations. I'm going to focus on that aspect of the RAP. So within the RAP, beneficial use impairment, or a BUI, in this case it's number 3, and looking at healthy fish and wildlife populations. And the goal here is to have a shift away from fish community as it is now, which is dominated by species like white perch, gizzard shad, brown bullhead, and common carp, species that are tolerant of poor water quality conditions. Another goal is to attain an index of biotic integrity, or an IBI, of a score between 55 and 60, and I'll talk a little bit about how that's calculated in a moment, how the data are collected. The overall fish community structure, we'd like to see 20 to 25% of piscivore biomass in the community. And to know how we're doing against these goals, how our progress is, it's important to monitor changes in the fish community to track our progress. So a little bit about the assessment programs that are going on. In the nearshore, there's the program that our agency runs, the Nearshore Community Index Netting Program, or NESN. There's a nearshore electrofishing program run by Fisheries and Oceans Canada. And there's also a walleye stocking effectiveness monitoring initiative, and I'll talk a little bit about walleye stocking in a couple slides. Other assessment going on is in Windermere Basin, which is a constructed wetland, and there we're looking at water quality as well as fish community monitoring. There's also a hydroacoustics and trawling program going on in Hamilton Harbour, looking at seasonal dynamics and fish abundance as well as distribution, and how that relates to water quality. So there's a lot of work going on in a relatively small geographic area, a lot of interest in Hamilton Harbour. First, the Nearshore Netting Program, or NESN. It's a standardized protocol that we've used all across Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence River. I'll just point out that the black dots there are areas of concern, AOCs, and then the white dots are non-AOC areas. So it allows you to provide some contrast between heavily impacted areas and relatively unimpacted areas. Some of the data from this program, I'll just point out this data here is logarithmic scale, and the first two species there in abundance are brown bullhead, which are about 2/3 of the population numerically, and then white perch about 22%. So if you just take those first two species, that's almost 90% of your fish community numerically. I'll just point out walleye there just as a placeholder. We're going to talk about walleye in a moment. It's significant that that species is now as prominent as it is. Some specific results towards those goals. The percent biomass of our piscivores, Hamilton Harbour is still below target. That dashed line there is the target goal, and we're still a little below that. And then the IBI is just below our target, but it's in the fair range. And you can see that's contrasted with other non-AOCs that we have done the similar work on. Boat electrofishing, very similar program to the trap netting program, different gear obviously. Also looking at areas of concern and non-AOCs, and has been used extensively across Lake Ontario. Similar sort of graph here. Point out that some of the abundant species found include alewife, white perch, goldfish, round goby, rudd, so some tolerant species and invasive species. As well, they've also found Chinook salmon and coho salmon in there. So different gear selectivity, a few more species caught that we don't see in our trap nets. Results shown very much the same way. So 2016 here, below target. Again, that's percent biomass of piscivores, still below target. And then the IBI is below our delisting range. So similar findings with two different gear types and different programs. A few words on walleye stocking. The strategy here was to essentially jumpstart the fish community. Our goal was to have more piscivores in the community, and just waiting around for it to happen was going to take too long, so decided we'd put some walleye in, again, to play a role in reestablishing that trophic structure we were looking for. It's important to balance angler expectations with our own expectations for restoration. This is a photo that was in the newspaper in Toronto earlier this year. It's not hard to tell what angler expectations are now. So that's our stocked walleye there. They're doing very well. Received very warmly by the anglers in Hamilton, so been very popular. Here's some more details on the stocking. So there's a couple of stocking periods here in the red or light pink at the top. In the 90s, we did transfer some adult walleye down to Hamilton Harbour. These were largely just brood stock that were retired from our fish culture system. They were taken down to Hamilton and released. So that's most of the 90s, with one incident there where we did stock some fingerlings. The more modern time, the modern effort, starting in 2012, is in the blue, has largely been these young summer fingerlings. And you can see the data there on the left from our nearshore trap netting program, and that's just walleye data there, and number of fish, on the y-axis. So there's those walleye, perhaps some of the walleye that were stocked in that adult transfer, very low numbers, and they fairly quickly disappeared by 2010. And in fact, in 2012, the first year we stocked the young walleye, we didn't catch any walleye that year. However, the next 3 times we were down there, we were seeing lots of 2-year-old walleye, 3-year-old, and 4-year-old. So it's pretty apparent that those fish survived well, they grew well, and they recruit really well to our trap nets as well. Next program I'll talk about briefly is Windermere Basin. So this is a constructed wetland in Hamilton Harbour. Was a contaminated site, has been restored. The water level in the basin is managed. So the water level is managed by a control structure. Still sort of in a calibration phase, trying to sort out the best way to manage this. You can see the temperature and dissolved oxygen data on the bottom. Temperatures do reach 25 to 30 degrees in the summertime with very low DO levels. So there is a challenge there. Some fisheries assessments been done. You can see in 2014, fathead minnow was pretty prominent. 2015, it was really prominent. So still not a very complex fish community, of course, warm water tolerant species. So there's work ongoing to find the right management touch in Windermere, but the work continues. The last program is hydroacoustics combined with midwater trawl, and this is looking at abundance of fish and distribution in relation to water temperatures and DO. So a lot going on here. Basically, for the purpose of this program, Hamilton Harbour split up into 4 quadrants because there are some striking differences between the quadrants and fish distribution. On the right here, you can see temperature and DO profiles. Temp is in red, dissolved oxygen is in blue. And to take away from this is in the spring, we don't have any stratification. Through the summer and fall, it is strongly stratified with very low dissolved oxygen levels. So the 4, sorry, I should point out too, those red dots are where the temp and DO loggers are. The yellow is the path of the hydroacoustics, and the red is the trawls. There's 4 quadrants, so there's the one in the west, the northwest, northeast, and then the south. So that those 4 quadrants will be referred to in the next couple of slides as I go through. So trawling results, a lot of species caught, but real striking differences in abundance through the season. So in the springtime, lots of rainbow smelt, emerald shiner. You can see those colors represented there, and the 4 bars there are related to those 4 quadrants in Hamilton Harbour. In the summer, alewife strongly dominate in all 4 quadrants you can see there. And continue lots of alewife in the fall, but also we start to see things like goldfish and rudd and some other invasive species starting to show up, particularly in this west basin. A lot going on in this plot here. This is tying temperature dissolved oxygen to hydroacoustics. So there's 3 different seasons here. Spring in yellow, summer in orange, and green is fall. So again, the 4 quadrants there, and you can see the depth of the thermocline in the dashed lines. And really to take away from this is in the yellow, again, is in the spring. On the y-axis is your depth. So the fish are distributed throughout the whole water column in the spring. You can see the yellow distributed right down to the bottom, basically. And to contrast that, in the summer, the fish move vertically and are restricted to that upper level of water. Basically, you've got habitat compression going on because of really low dissolved oxygen, in fact, anoxia in some cases. So the fish are abundant. Here, the length of that bar is abundance in the summertime, but largely in the west and in the upper part of the water column. So it's pretty dynamic, seems to be largely dictated by dissolved oxygen and temperature. Some main conclusions drawn from this hydroacoustics and trawl program. The fish are unequally distributed throughout the harbour. The highest densities in biomass were found in the western sector. And that summer anoxia really, again, restricts the amount of habitat available within the harbour. And there's a potential for increased predation with that compression of those fish. Future work, there's still more work to be done, still more opportunities to tie this work to other programs going on. There's some surveys of primary productivity going on, and then some telemetry work on the top predators, mostly those walleye I was talking about. Just in summary here, when you put all the results from the various programs together, it looks like the fish community is still dominated by invasive and tolerant species, and this was borne out by the nearshore trap netting program, electrofishing, and in Windermere Basin. Not meeting the targets yet for piscivore biomass or the IBI score, and that's borne out by Neeson and the electrofishing again. And we see unequal distribution throughout the harbour spatially, and that was shown by the hydroacoustics and trawling. And again, that summer anoxia really restricts the amount of habitat that's available. Lots of continued collaborative work planned, lots of people working in Hamilton Harbour, and more to come. I'll just point out on this last page here is a really good example of some collaboration in the field. Our staff there on the left actually bringing fish to DFO there on the right, and it's worth pointing out at this point too, I want to thank all the technicians we have and all the different agencies doing all this great work. It wouldn't be possible without all their dedication and hard work. Thank you.